Subscribe to our YouTube channel for in-depth interviews of India Inc. and press the bell icon so that you do not miss our updates.
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Nirmal Bang. I'm Hiral Datia. We have with us Professor Arun Kumar from Malcolm Ali Desai, Chair Professor, Institute of Social Sciences, and retired Professor of Economics, JNU, joining us on the show. Welcome to the show, Mr. Kumar. It's a pleasure to speak to you as well.
Thank you.
My first question coming to you is overall, the kind of impact that COVID 19 has had on different economies, it's massive and no one has been spared. What is the after effect that you're seeing with regards to growth prospects on developing countries as well as, emerging markets like India?
So, we must understand that lockdown was necessary because COVID 19 is very infectious. The coronavirus spreads like anything. So, we needed to keep people apart so as to slow down. Now, lockdown is not a solution to the disease, but the point is that if you can slow it down, then it doesn't spread. And therefore the hospital capacity remains adequate, and you get time to create more capacity, to create testing capacity, to do contact tracing, so it can slow down the spread. So lockdown is necessary, but what it also means is that you voluntarily shut down economic activity. So wherever lockdown was implemented, it shut down economic activity. And in India, because 94% people are employed in the unorganized sector, India was the hardest hit. Like
Hmm.
what you saw in India, you didn't see millions of people walking down the roads, bare feet, with the children in tow and luggage on the head. That kind of picture didn't come from any other country except India. So India was particularly hit hard, and that's why out of the 20 major economies, India lost the maximum in terms of rate of growth in the month of April, May. And now you see when the lockdown is eased, then what you have is more economic activity, so economy begins to recover. So in a sense, the economy will do better, and that's what you see the data showing, that the
Hmm.
economy has done better in the month of June, July, August, September,
Hmm.
but it is still about 30% below what it was last year in 2019. So we haven't reached where we were earlier, and that will take quite some time because the services sector gets hit very hard, because services sector is where people are in touch with each other. They're close to each other, whether it be a
Hmm.
barber or a beautician, or in a bus or in a train, or in tourism or hotels. These are in enclosed spaces. So all these sectors get very hard hit. And services sector is now 55% of our GDP. So if the services sector gets hit, even though agriculture continues to function, but that's only 13% of GDP. So
Hmm.
13% of GDP cannot compensate for decline in 55% of the GDP. So that's why we're still substantially hit. Our consumer demand is down. Our investments are down, and it could take anything up to 1 to 2 to 3 years for us to recover back to where we were in 2019. And there's the uncertainty, because you see whenever winter approaches, this coronavirus
Hmm.
spreads, like we're seeing today in USA, in Europe, where record highs are being experienced. So there's a second, third wave in US and Europe, because of the onset of winter, and that could very well happen in India. So the uncertainty is that if it rises again, and we are not over the first wave itself. If you
Hmm.
think of it, we're still having about 45,000 cases a day, which is not a
Right.
small number. So it could still spread more. So there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of young people have lost employment, they have lost income, salaries have been cut. So the demand is down. Unemployment is very high still. So all these things plus the uncertainty, you don't expect investment to revive quickly. You don't expect consumer confidence to come back. You see a certain blip because of the Diwali and the other festivals that are around the corner, but
Hmm.
you're not sure of whether it'll last for any length of time because of the cut in incomes and the decline in investment process. And the similar thing you'll see in emerging markets, because emerging markets also have a large unorganized sector component,
Hmm.
and the unorganized sector gets hit most because it loses its working capital. So if you think of a ready patriwala who's
Hmm.
selling fruits and vegetables, he buys the fruits and vegetables in the morning, sells it by the night time. Whatever money he gets, he uses that to consume, plus buys again for the next day. And if he doesn't have work for 7 days, then he exhausts his working capital. He cannot restart. So a lot of these micro units and small units are not able to restart,
Mm,
because they don't have working capital. So there's a big working
correct.
capital shortage, and they are the biggest employers. So for instance, the MSME, as we call it in India,
Mm,
which consists of micro, small, and medium. Micro is 99% of the MSME, and it
correct.
employs 97.5% of the workforce of MSME. So the micro sector doesn't revive, then 97.5% of the MSME workforce doesn't come back. And then you have CMI data saying that 20 million salaried employees lost work, and then you have data from CMI saying 5 million professionals lost work, and then you have data which shows that large number of people had salary cuts, like in media, between 10% and 40% salary cut was there, and you're from media, so you know that.
Mm,
So in other words, the demand is down, uncertainty is great. So therefore,
mm,
even the emerging markets will face problems going forward. And the developed countries are facing problem because now there's again lockdown, there are curfews,
mm.
in various countries. So in Europe, in America, they're not yet doing it because of the elections. But I think given that they're having about 1 lakh cases a day, they'll have to be careful about these things. So if there's a downturn in Europe, there's a downturn in the US,
Mm.
that'll affect exports of the emerging market countries and so on, and that will once again boomerang back on us.
Right. So, with all of this, Mr. Kumar, overall, if you go to see, how do you think India's economic response has been with regards to COVID-19 crisis? And taking this into consideration, if you have to look at the stimulus packages that have been announced by the government, what the RBI has done so far as well in the last couple of monetary policies, do you think the quantum of stimulus which is required is enough? Or do you think we still have some more capability? Because I'm sure on the financial front, we have limited resources. So, how would you bundle this up?
So, the package that has been announced is greatly inadequate. It's from the budget, you're giving only 2 lakh crores.
Mm,
The total package is about 21 lakh crore, but that's mostly loans. That's mostly credit.
mm,
Now, if the economy is working, then loans and credit help. But if businesses are shut, then loans and credit, is not there. And if the demand is down, now there are two kinds of companies in the country. One which will do well, like pharma will do well because of the disease, like your telecom will do well because
mm,
people are using a lot more of telecom and watching television and using their mobile phones, etc. Then you'll have FMCG, which is an essential, so parts of FMCG will do well. So there are these kind of companies that will do well, but rest, whether it
mm,
be textile or leather goods or other sectors, automobile is doing well because there's a pent up demand. There's also the case that, after 15 years, you have to change your car. So therefore, there's a
mm,
demand that's come, which, people didn't buy in April, May, June, etc. That's getting lumped. But whether it'll continue further, that's the problem. And Mr. Bajaj has already said that even though they're producing more, but it's still 3% down compared to last year, September, October.
mm,
So in other words, demand still, in the automobile sector has not gone back to where it was earlier. So in other words, there are some companies which will do well, but large number of companies will not do well, whether it be hotels and restaurants and airlines and a lot of service sector companies, etc.,
mm.
which will be in deep trouble. So what you needed to do was pump in purchasing power. It's the purchasing power that has gone eroded because a lot of people are unemployed or their incomes have come down drastically. So therefore, you have a situation where
Mm.
1 minute. So, you have a situation in which demand has come down. So demand needed to be generated. Now, if demand is not there, then why would industry produce? Because if you
Correct.
produce when demand is not there, then your losses will increase, your stocks will increase, and therefore your working capital requirement will go up, your interest payment will rise. So
Mm,
therefore, industry will only produce if there's demand. So government needed to focus on demand creation, and that is what it has not done. Credit, etc., comes later. And the other thing is, with the package the government has announced, it's announced a lot of policy changes, like on the agriculture, like on labor, like on the space and so on, or privatization. Now, these are all long-term things. Whether
mm,
they're right or wrong, they won't have any immediate impact. Whereas what you needed was an immediate impact. So I've been
mm,
giving the example that if my house is on fire and somebody comes and says, okay, rather than dousing it, I'll now set up a fire station near your house, I'll buy more fire engines, by then the house would be burned. So instead of creating short-term immediate demand by creating
Mm.
employment, and increasing expenditures, what we are doing is we are saying, okay, policy changes so that, in the long run, something will change. But if in the short run, your demand is not there, industry will not revive. If industry doesn't revive, investment will not revive. Investment has
Correct.
come down a lot as per CMI data and other data. Without investment, how will growth revive? So in other words, the government has got the, cart before the horse. It's needed to focus entirely. Now, our attention is being diverted because farmers are protesting, youth is protesting, labor is protesting, public sector units workers are protesting. So instead of focusing entirely on the taking care of the pandemic, we are getting diverted into
Mm.
all these protests and so on. So public is not going to pull in the right direction, along with the policymaker. They're not going to listen to the policymaker. And one of the things that is very important, which Andrew Cuomo, the governor of New York State, said, long back, that if the public doesn't listen to me, then I will not be successful in my lockdown. So
Mm.
the public has to listen. And we have seen in Kerala, which was an example of how well it controlled the disease, that as protests took place there and as the Pongal came, the number of cases grew. And now Kerala became a case. Similarly, in Delhi, you opened up prematurely. And so number of cases are rising. So we have to have the public with us. Now, this
Mm.
kind of reform, what the government is trying to propose, is something which may or may not work in the long run, but certainly not in the short run. So what was required was immediate creation of employment and what I call survival package. You see, a
Mm.
survival package consists of taking care of the micro sector, which generates employment, taking
Mm.
care of the people who have lost employment in the rural areas and the urban areas through strengthening the rural employment guarantee scheme and creating a new urban guarantee scheme, and ramping up our health facilities because this disease can keep on recurring. Until the vaccine comes, the disease can assert itself at any point of time because lockdown is not a solution. It's only a slowing down mechanism. It's not a
Correct.
solution to the disease. So therefore, the government needed to come with a survival package which would take care of all these things, the basics of life.
Mm.
Instead, what the government is doing is not admitting that things are bad. Whereas we know that the budget was created with a growth of 10%. It was assumed that there'd be a 10% growth in nominal terms.
Mm.
Instead, we have a decline of at least 20%. So the budget figures are wrong by 30%. So your tax revenue will be half of what tax you were going to collect.
Mm.
So your deficit is going to balloon. Already by August, it had reached 115% of the annual target. And this is
Correct.
going to continue to balloon. States are complaining that they don't have money to pay salaries. In Delhi, you have the situation where the municipal corporation
Mm.
doctors and nurses have not been paid salaries for months. So there is a deep crisis. So government needs to immediately redraw the budget and
Mm.
provide funds for this survival package. And everything else must come to a stop because this is the most critical thing. And not go for all kinds of schemes and do
Mm.
this and do that and divert attention. So I think the government has to focus very carefully on the pandemic and its after effects, its economic fallout, and
Mm.
then move forward with other things later on when the pandemic is taken care of.
Mm. Right. So taking all of this into consideration, what's your growth outlook for India, taking into consideration the inflation as well right now? Because a lot of people are of the opinion that there needs to be a phase where the government of India needs to ignore the inflation and only focus on growth because inflation will be taken care of at some point in time. What would your view be?
So, if you think about inflation, actually wages are coming down. The commodity prices are coming down,
Mm.
except for petroleum related products, because the government has increased the taxation. Otherwise,
Mm.
even those would have come down. So, actually, there is a tendency towards deflation. But what has happened is that in rural areas, wholesale prices have declined, all over the country. And in rural areas, the farmers are getting lower prices. So you have this disjuncture between rural prices of agricultural commodities less than the market price.
Mm.
Okay. In the urban areas, you have a higher price, for food items. So trade is taking advantage of the situation. Otherwise, even in the urban areas with demand down and with salaries and wages down and a lot of workers without work, prices should be coming down. So I think inflation has to be managed by the government better by, having proper policies so that, trade doesn't take advantage of, creating shortages and playing with the thing. Now, the other thing is that if demand is down and government spends more money, then only demand will be created, prices will not rise. Especially when wages are not rising, especially when the commodity prices are not rising, then there's no reason for inflation. So therefore, stepping up fiscal deficit would help in generating demand, you know, because fiscal deficit means I'm spending more than what my revenue is,
Hmm.
in that case, demand is pushed into the market, and that's what industry needs, because industry needs people to buy things, and when government spends more by creating, say, rural employment guarantee scheme, urban guarantee scheme, by doing public investment, etc.,
Hmm.
that all generates demand. So at this point of time, it is this which is the most important thing, and inflation needs to be taken care of by other means, so that trade doesn't take advantage of the fact that the situation is grim, and therefore it is taking advantage. So I think there's a lot of profiteering from trade which needs to be taken care of. Otherwise, why is it that wholesale prices are almost zero and retail prices are rising at 7%? In the rural areas, the farmers are complaining that they are getting below MSP, below the market price, and then in the urban areas, the food prices are rising. It can only mean that trade is taking advantage of the situation and expanding its margins.
Hmm. Right. And overall, if you go to see, when you talk about the measures that have been taken as well with the government, another aspect is that because of what's happening around, a lot of manufacturing could shift to India from China. Now, do you think all of this taking into consideration, because even before the pandemic struck, the global merchandise export to GDP ratio has been declining, and this is the first time we've seen a decline since World War II. Uh, does this take us if you have to talk about the entire process of deglobalization that we were already under?
So, what the pandemic has taught every nation is that don't have long supply chains. So everybody's talking about reducing their supply chains and getting their capital to come back and invest in their own country rather than elsewhere. So, Trump is telling its companies that you come out of China and come back to the US. Similarly, many European countries are saying that we ourselves are getting more protectionist with, increasing our tariffs, etc., and not letting the Chinese bid for various things. So there's protectionism that's growing, as you said, deglobalization. So in that kind of a situation, not much capital can be expected to come into India. Capital is
Mm.
going to go back into the countries from where it is originating. So European capital going back to Europe, and US capital going back to the US. That's more likely than anything else. Second is that you see, when demand is down and Indian industry is struggling, then why would foreign investment come into India? Because if
Correct.
demand is not there, then they would not be able to take advantage of the demand that was there earlier. And Indian economy was already slowing down before the pandemic hit us. There were already problems with the Indian economy. And finally, the foreign capital that comes into India is only 5% of the total investment in the economy. 95% is Indian investment. And it
Mm.
is the problem has come because 95% of which is the Indian investment, that has been falling. So that had peaked in 2012 at about 36.5%. That's come down to 28% before the pandemic. And now
Mm.
that's come down to, barely anything. So in a sense, the problem is the Indian investment is weak because the demand is weak. And for the same reason, not much foreign capital will come. What capital has come into Geo, into Reliance, is because these big companies, the tech companies, they're doing well, they're cash rich, they want to take advantage of the Geo platform. Other
Mm.
than that, I don't think much investment is going to come in, at least till the Indian economy recovers back to the 2019 level. So I don't think we should bank on that, because foreign capital is only 5%, as I said, foreign investment is only 5% of the total investment in the Indian economy. So we need to worry about the 95%. If that doesn't revive, then even foreign capital will not come in and revive demand here. And then the foreign capital that will come will be highly capital intensive, will not generate that much employment. So therefore, without generating much employment, you're not going to have demand revival. So I think we need to look at our micro sector. We need to look at the small sector. We need to look at our agriculture and see how to generate demand there, how to
Mm.
generate employment there, so that mass demand is generated. You know, Textile sector, leather goods sector, they're still operating at 60%, 70%,
Mm.
50%, capacity. And those are the mass markets where, you have a lot of employment generation. Then education and health, you know, In education sector, there's a deep crisis. A lot of people are shifting out of private schools to government schools because they can't afford the thing. So a lot of private schools are closing. Teachers are not getting salaries, in the private sector. So therefore, again, the demand is down. Education, a lot of poor children don't have these smartphones, so they can't attend online classes. So there are a lot of problems in education, and that's one sector we can generate a lot of employment. The educated unemployed can be given a lot of employment in the education sector. They can be, drafted to do contact tracing. They can be given simple training to help out with the paramedics and so on. So there are a
Correct.
lot of opportunities for the educated unemployed which need to be created. And if you do that, then the demand will revive. So I don't think we should bank on any much foreign capital coming in to revive the Indian economy. That's only, in some tech sectors where we may need capital, where we may need technology, that's okay, but
Mm.
not as a general proposition to revive the economy.
Right. And if India needs to increase its stimulus as a percentage of the GDP, what according to you is an ideal amount, and what are the possible sources from where the resources can be borrowed?
Okay, so as I said, the government is planned on the wrong amount. It's planned on the 10% growth nominal, whereas I think the decline is at least 20%.
Hmm.
So our budget is off by 30%. So our tax resources will be down by about 50%. So our fiscal deficit is currently running at about 30% of GDP. The mistake that many people have, analysts are making is they're still calculating on 204 lakh crore, which was the GDP last year. Whereas if it had risen by 10%, it would have gone to
Hmm.
225 lakh crore. Instead, it has fallen by at least 20%. So it's gone down to 160 lakh crore. So there's a 160 lakh crore to 220 is a 60 lakh crore gap.
Hmm.
So we need to be calculating. And last year, already the planned deficit was about 10% because, the center was having a higher deficit, states were having a higher deficit, off balance sheet items were there. So 10% of 224 lakh crore becomes 15% of 160 lakh crores. So already the fiscal deficit was 15%. Now if tax resources fall, that'll add another 14, 15% of GDP. So we are looking at about 30% fiscal deficit to GDP ratio. You know, Now if you do the survival package, then you're talking about another 10 to 12%
Hmm.
tax. So you're talking about a 40% fiscal deficit on 160 lakh crore. And so it's a huge deficit. It's an unheard of deficit. And the point is that government is not doing the 10, 12% that needs to be done for the survival package. And that's why, we are continuing to be short of our demand. So if the government needs to do even this 30%, then it needs to raise resources. So one place it can raise resources is, by floating COVID bonds, and the banks are flush with funds because credit demand is down. People are depositing money, but doesn't have places to invest in because the
Hmm.
businesses are down, investment is down, so credit offtake is down. So 8 lakh crore was being deposited, in the reverse repo in the RBI. So that 8 lakh crore can be invested in the COVID bond, which the government can get. Then there are the tax expenditures of about 5% of GDP
Hmm.
that you could reduce wherever you could. Then you have to cut the inessential expenditures of the government. That could raise another 3, 4% of GDP. And then you need to borrow from the wealthy, those who have the wealth. You could borrow from there by floating these COVID bonds at a rate of interest higher than the reverse repo rate. So
Hmm.
you can get some money. And then whatever is the balance left, that the RBI will have to monetize. So all these things you'll have to do, and that's why I'm saying the budget has to be redrawn immediately, so that you can begin to do all this immediately. Otherwise, the fiscal deficit will burgeon. The states will be in trouble. The states will have double jeopardy because their tax revenue is down, and then the transfers from the center will be down because the
Hmm.
center is collecting less. So all this thing requires immediate action.
Right. So, what would your view be with regards to where, fiscal monetization is concerned? Do you think right now is the right time to do it?
So, we are getting late. We have opened up the economy slowly. The easing has been taking place. But because of lack of demand, it's not really working that well. So, what we need to do was starting July, August itself to try and pumping purchasing power and get the monetization of the deficit, get the COVID bonds going, raise funds, and as, the funds get exhausted, then the RBI would have to monetize the deficit. And that will not be inflationary because that's only going to boost demand above where it is today. And today it's at least 30 to 40% below where it should be. So the potential is there, and that's why I'm not that worried about inflation, that, this
Mm,
monetization of the deficit will lead to
mm.
inflation. Yes, it will have some implications for the money market, some implications for the interest rates. All those things are there in the money market. But as far as the macro is concerned, in the macro, it will only generate demand and therefore not be inflationary.
Mm. Right. And with all of this, do you think that the central bank should also develop a clear strategy on, what to do from here on, or what is done is enough at the one end, because it is legally bound to an inflation target. Yet there is a strong argument to look past the current spurt in inflation and test both limits of conventional as well as the unconventional monetary policy.
So I think this idea that, the central bank can target inflation is something that's been always controversial. That it could, lead to a band of 4 to 6%, inflation. I think that has been a controversial thing because in India, food prices are not monetary phenomena. They depend on the monsoons, they depend on various other factors. So, we are not able to really target it properly. So what may work in the advanced countries, and even in advanced countries, many people say it doesn't really work that way. So in India, where food prices and other prices are not really in the control of RBI, you can't really have this kind of targeting. That so we are copying from the West, whereas
Mm,
our economy is not like the advanced economies. Our economy is very different structurally and so on. We have a large unorganized sector, large agriculture, which is dependent on the monsoon. So I think we shouldn't have gone in that direction. Second is that you see the phenomenon today is not a monetary phenomenon.
mm,
When you release more money supply, into the economy, like today, our foreign exchange reserves are building up. Okay, so when the RBI buys the foreign exchange reserves, it means money is increasing in the economy, and that's why cash GDP ratio now is
mm,
higher than what it was before demonetization. And that's also because people are keeping liquid rather than going and doing things. So velocity of circulation has dropped. So it's not just that money supply has increased, but it's that the velocity of circulation is also decreased. So therefore, when you introduce more cash, but velocity of circulation decreases, it doesn't generate demand. Okay, and that's the situation that we are in. So RBI can only cut interest rates, and it can only allow for credit to be
mm.
given, which is what it has done. So it has done what it could do. I don't think the role is much of RBI. The role is much more of the Ministry of Finance, and the government needs to take a political decision on that. How much to boost the demand and how quickly to boost the demand. Government keeps saying we'll announce package. We are waiting for the right time. But the right time was already July, August, when the economy, you started opening up the economy, you started liberalizing various sectors, you
Mm,
started allowing, various sectors to begin to function, and the micro sector and others didn't have the, capital, so you needed to give them funds, So like a good scheme, like for, many Redi Patriwala, they allowed 10,000 rupees of loan. But it's not reaching the micro sectors, not reaching all the Redi Patriwalas, So you needed to do much more on giving loans to the micro sector, enabling them to begin to restart business,
mm,
So therefore, in my view, RBI has done what it could. RBI cannot do much more. It can
mm.
maybe cut the reverse repo rate a little more. It can cut the repo rate a little more. But that's not going to have an effect unless demand revives. And demand will revive only when investment revives and consumption revives. So that government has to come in to
Right.
boost investment, to boost consumption. That the government has to do fiscal policies.
Right. And then with this, what's happened is since the pandemic started, everyone's been of the view that, and that's a fact, that rural India is somewhere less impacted versus urban. However, when you see the remittances from urban to rural, they are still pretty low. Do you think sustenance with regards to the revival of the Indian economy, and everyone's saying that yeah, probably it's going to be rural India who will get us back to the revival path. Do you think that's something which is sustainable and doable?
So we need to generate demand everywhere. A lot of people have gone back to the rural areas. They don't have incomes. Our rural employment guarantee scheme is very inadequate. It provides 100 days of work, So
Hmm.
which means, to one family, one person getting 100 days of work means that, you're giving for 20 days per person, and you're giving a very small salary. So I think that needs to be increased to 200 days, and the salary needs to be maybe
Hmm.
doubled so that you can get some support. So that's the way to do it. But otherwise, rural areas are also facing problem, and that's why farmers are protesting, because they're getting less than the market price, less than the minimum support price in large swaths of the country, and
Hmm.
that's why there's so much protest. And the protest is not just in Haryana and Punjab; it's all over. You had the milk producers protesting, you had the
Hmm.
poultry ones, you had the floriculture and the horticulture and the
Hmm.
vegetable producers. All of them lost a lot during the pandemic because the things could not go out. So incomes have come down even in the rural areas. It's not that the rural areas are going to be able to boost the economy. And people say agriculture can function and agriculture would still grow at 3%, but agriculture is down to 13% of GDP. So unless your services sector revives, both in urban and rural areas, you're not going to have a revival of demand. So it's like clutching at straws to say,
Hmm.
okay, agriculture can function and therefore rural economy can function, etc. Yes, the rabi crop was good. This kharif crop may also be good. So some purchasing power will be increased. But the problem is that if demand for food is down,
Hmm.
then actually prices will get depressed and farmers will be more in trouble. you know so like
Correct.
happened during demonetization, the farmers were in trouble because of demonetization, and therefore the demand decreased and demand for their produce also decreased. So if 94% who are in the unorganized sector, and even the organized sector, as I said it earlier, is in trouble because their wages have been cut, their employment has been cut. 20 million salaried employees have lost work, 5 million professionals have lost work, and then you have a lot of people with the wages being cut. So the demand for food also will go down. So therefore, the incomes in rural areas will also go down. So it's not as if it's a clear-cut situation. So therefore, coming back again, demand has to be generated. For
Hmm.
demand generation, employment has to be created in rural areas, in urban areas.
Hmm.
People who've
Hmm.
gone back to rural areas, they're not able to get work. People who have returned from rural areas to urban areas, only in some industries they're able to get work, but large number of areas they're not able to get work. So the people are unemployed, they don't have purchasing power. And given the uncertainty, a lot of the middle class also feels, let us conserve rather than spend, because we don't know what times are coming, whether the trouble will last further and so
Hmm.
on. So therefore, this demand revival is the key. If you don't revive demand, and for that government has to take steps to increase the rural employment guarantee scheme, urban guarantee scheme, public investment, investment in education and health. These are the areas where it should, and give funds to the micro sector so that the micro sector can revive.
Right. And then, taking the funds to micro sectors into consideration, when you talk about banks as well, the credit growth has not really picked up.
Yes.
Lenders are going slow on issuing, say, fresh bank guarantees. Uh, do you think they need to really become slightly more liberal with regards to where, fresh loans are concerned? Because again, on one hand, they have the concern with regards to where a spike in bad loans are concerned. Another thing is everyone saying that, okay, the issue of bad loans needs to be sorted out by creating a bad bank so they have that some bit of liberty with regards to lending further. How do we tackle this problem? Because if it's not taken care of right now, our stressed assets and NPA issues over the next 12 to 18 months is going to be huge.
No, you are absolutely right. I think the banks are worried about that. So even though for MSME loans, etc., there's a sovereign guarantee which the government is giving, so that banks should have been able to give more liberally. But I think they're worried because, at some point there could be a political decision and the banks could be left holding the bad debt. So I think this guarantee has to be more firm. And, the reach of the banks to the micro sector is very weak. So we mistakenly call MSME as the micro sector, but actually what happens is that all policies are for small and medium and hardly for the micro sector. Now think about it. The micro sector has 60 million units, whereas the small and medium has 6 lakh units, zero point 0.6 million. So that's why the micro sector is 99% of the MSME. But when we talk about MSME policies, we are talking about the small and medium and not the micro. So
Mm.
now, for instance, in the new package that has been introduced, the MSME has been collapsed. So medium and small is also being treated as a micro. So all the loans will go there and not go to the micro sector. So we need special dispensation under which we'll tackle the micro sector and let these micro sector units come forward and get loans, and that has to be guaranteed by the bank. So, what was earlier being called the Shishu loans, etc., those have to be properly structured so that it really gets to the micro sector. And without that, the micro sector will not be able to revive. It lacks working capital. It is not able to revive properly.
Mm. Right. And then with this, when you talk about fundraising as well, it's the private sector banks that were the first ones to react and start raising capital to protect their balance sheet. Uh, do you think bank recapitalization on the PSU front is also something what they really need to look at closely?
So, if the NPA problem is going to increase because many businesses could fail, especially the highly leveraged firms, which have a large amount of borrowing and high interest burden, they are the first ones to fail. And, many firms in the financial sector are also usually highly leveraged. And that's why, the firms are trying to raise capital, to do that. But the thing is that the public sector banks, because they're owned by the government is not going to let them fail. So I think the problem is not just recapitalization. Private sector banks, of course, because they may not get funds from the government, but
Mm.
public sector banks can get funds from the government. So I think the real issue is what will happen to the NPAs. How
Mm.
the government will see to it that the NPAs don't rise. With the NPAs begin to rise, then there'll be trouble. And that is where the government's action directly in helping the poor people to get incomes and to get purchasing power, that will help. So I think there has to be direct action. Whatever the banks can do, they will do. But I think more than that, it's the government which has to come forward and create demand so that even the demand for the micro sector product, etc., rises. If poor people don't have employment, then they'll cut back their consumption, and that will directly impact on the micro sector demand, and therefore the micro sector will remain in trouble. So there has to be a special dispensation, not just the banking sector, but something more from the government for this micro sector.
Right. And lastly, Mr. Kumar, overall, if you see in terms of the yield curve in India, that is steep, which is seeming really attractive. Now, do you think that the central bank's efforts to suppress bond rates via yield curve adventure is going to endanger their own inflation target?
As I said, this inflation target in the Indian context is a bit of a problem,
Hmm.
because our food prices are not really in the control
Hmm.
of monetary policy thing. And then we have structural problems. We have unorganized sector, etc., whose data is not there. So I think what we are talking about is the organized sector.
Hmm.
The organized sector, of course, senses all this, and the people in the money markets are looking at the yield curve and looking at the bond market, etc., what the RBI's actions will be. But I think the real problem for the Indian economy is how to get the unorganized sector, how to
Hmm.
boost the unorganized sector, how to boost the employment, and how to boost the demand there. If we don't do that, then whatever we do on the monetary front will not be able to help the organized sector. Automobile sector, because of various reasons, may have done very well in August,
Hmm.
September, October. But if that doesn't continue, then the automobile sector will also be again down. You know, and therefore, in a sense, the organized sector by itself will not be able to boost itself. It is the unorganized sector. It's the sector where monetary policy has very little impact.
Hmm.
Those are the sectors that need to be taken care of, and that's why I again and again say, whatever the RBI is doing is okay. What now we need to do is the fiscal policy part, the political part, of how to help the poor, how to get them to rise. And I think a lot of the middle classes and the well-off sections have also got sensitized to how badly off our poor are. The pictures of millions of people walking down the street with children in tow and luggage on their head, walking bare feet, in this heat, that I think sensitized a lot of people. So I think now's the time where the government can take courage in hand and do much more for this, tremendous inequality that is there in the economy, and try and raise funds so that we can help the poor. And let me also say that this pandemic has shown that the problem is collective. We can only deal with the problem collectively. It's not an individual problem. You can be a high, you can be the president of USA and contract the disease. You can be in a very poor country and contract the disease. You can be in very rich countries and contract the disease. So it's a collectivity. So we need to act as a collectivity. We need to create this collectivity, and we can only create the collectivity when the poor feel included in the society. If they don't feel included in society, then the collectivity is not there. And then, like you see crowds in Sadar Bazaar in Delhi and other markets, because people have got fed up. People are not obeying rules. And if they don't obey rules, things can go bad. And now we see that pandemics keep coming. If you look at the last 20 years, we've had Nipah, we've had, SARS and MERS and, other such diseases, and then this one. So every 3 to 4 years, now we are lucky that this one is virulent. Okay, but it doesn't have high mortality like Ebola. Ebola had 40 to 50% mortality. If the next pandemic is both virulent as well as high mortality, then hundreds of millions will get impacted very immediately. So we need to be prepared, and therefore we have to act as a collectivity. And that is what the big lesson is. And the government must try and create a collectivity, try and bring people together, try and be more credible, reduce the alienation of people. Those things have become very important. So it's not just economic, but it's also political and social.
Right. And thank you so much, Mr. Arun. And my last question is, if you could just tell us a little more about your forthcoming book that you have been writing on the Indian economy's greatest crisis, which is COVID, I assume. What is it? I mean, when do we expect the release? Little more details on that.
So, it's a full-length book, which should come out in December. And we are in the final stage of editing it and cover, etc. And what I have done there is to describe what the disease means, and why a modern day economy gets hit hard, because we've had pandemics earlier, but this one has hit us very hard, So what is it in the modern day economy, why it gets hit very hard, and why the macro is very important. The macro has to be set right. So the macro, where is it that the problem has come? And why is it that the government is not doing what it should do? So what is government doing and what should it do, So these things, and then its social impact, on the poor, the kind of globalization that we have, whether the globalization has created a problem for us, So these are the different chapters in the book that I have.
I'm sure. I mean, that's something which we will be looking forward to read as well once it's released. And we'll for sure give you a review on that one as well. But thank you, Mr. Kumar, so much for joining us on the show. Great insights that we've picked up. And I hope to speak to you soon again. In fact, once your book releases, looking forward to have a chat on the release as well. Thank you so much and stay safe.
Thank you very much. Same to you. Thank you. Bye.